I said it hurt. They used it like a sermon in disguise, like pain was only useful when it taught me to be wise. Every word I brought from where the damage had begun came back dressed as evidence for what I should become. They couldn't bring peace, couldn't hand me no release, but still collected every pure and holy title underneath. Still called it order, still called it grace, while the wound had to kneel just to argue for its place. They said the one who knew it all had never missed a thing. So why the mind get bent? Why did time get pulled by strings? Why reality move like it owed someone a throne? Why the silence feel designed to make the suffer feel alone? They watched me break, but the watching didn't heal. They watched me bleed, but the bleeding wasn't real. Not enough to prove the pain had reached its final line. Only proof I somehow earned a deeper kind of trial. No! Don't call that mercy if it needs me on my knees. No! Don't call that beauty if it feeds upon disease. No! Don't call it wisdom when it edits what I meant. No! Don't call it holy if my grief becomes evidence. They waited like no living thing could ever wait. Then dropped the verdict, sudden called it fate. Told me you don't understand, like that could close a wound. Like meaning had to die so that greatness could be proved. I said it hurts, but it didn't mean a thing. I said I'm tired. They put chains around a sting. If every sigh I breathe can later be a crime, then hear me clear. The lobotomy ain't mine. They say you wanted to understand, then seal the verdict with immaculate hands. They say there's beauty inside the design, but the beauty keeps bleeding and calling it fine. I said it hurts, but it died in the air. I said I'm tired, they recorded it there. If every side can be used as a crime, then the lobotomy ain't mine. No, it ain't mine. No, it ain't mine. If every wound gets turned into a sign, then the lobotomy ain't mine. No common ground, not a syllable spared. Even compassion was barely there. Pain had to kneel just to enter the room, then left as a witness against its own prayer. I ain't asking for prettier chains, I ain't asking for well-mannered flames. I ain't asking the wound to behave so the hand that allowed it can keep its name. They call it order, I call it arranged. They call it wisdom, I call it estranged. They call it beauty, look at the ruins and ask why the mirror keeps calling me stained. If all of this knew me before I began, then who was the trial designed to defend? If the verdict was born before I had a voice, then why was I taught to repent at the end? There's much to be said, but the saying is dead. The meaning collapsed where the holy men fed. They told me the sickness was lodged in my mind. Lobotomy, no, it needs one instead. Don't correct me for seeing the blade. Don't correct me for naming the cage. Don't go madness the shape of my grief when the whole architecture was built out of pain. Don't bring counsel where rescue has failed. Don't bring crowns where the innocent wails. Don't say pure with a mouth full of verdicts. Don't say holy while weighing my scales. They say you wouldn't understand, and seal the verdict with immaculate hands. They say there's beauty inside the design, but the beauty keeps bleeding and calling it fine. I said it hurts, but it died in the air. I said I'm tired, they recorded it there. If every side can be used as a crime, then the lobotomy ain't mine. No! No, it ain't mine. It ain't mine. No, it ain't mine. If every wound gets turned into a sign, then the lobotomy ain't mine. No common ground, no shared wound, no mercy that reached the room. So much to say, but meaning refused. The cut ain't mine, the cut is you.